If we do not control the demand side, do you think that we would ever create the supply in-house?
We shouldn't control the demand side if we can raise the supply side. For instance, the budget, in my view, is pure water budget. 6 trillion naira for 180 million Nigerians. That's a joke. So what you need to do is to pump money in the system. The economy needs a stimulus. It needs a bounce. We need to be announcing 100 trillion naira budget. The question you would ask me is, where do you find the money? Well, I can tell you, you can find the money from linking the housing stock to the banks. In my study, I discovered that we have $7 trillion, not naira, $7 trillion worth of housing stock, but they are dead capital. I advise clients about wealth creation. 10 Igbo clients I advise have never got a dime from the banks to equitize their housing stock. So anytime you want to buy a house, it's cash. But I just came from South Africa. If you compare Joburg, and we say that we're ahead of Joburg, that's a joke. If you look at the Joburg financial market, all you need to do is to buy one flat. The banks are after you. So the banks link the housing stock and equitize it. That is 7.8 or say $8 trillion you are looking at. Nigeria has 150 nautical miles extra. Every country has 200 nautical miles on the exclusive economic zone. Nigeria is one of 8 countries lucky enough to have another 150. It's like saying that you have land that you don't use because you don't even know about it. That's money. We allow the Chinese and others to come and take our natural aquatic resources and go away. So these are the 2 areas. In oil and gas, we have 53 transactional issues on the supply chain that can add value. We're not in control.
Even though we're trying to diversify the economy.
Yeah, because you can diversify, but even on the oil and gas, hydrocarbons, we haven't touched it. All we know is PMS, kerosene, jet fuel. There are other things that are playing out. Dangote is playing out on that. He's opening his huge petrochemicals very shortly. So there's a lot that can be done. Do
we need to have a special policy in terms of bringing the private sector into all of this, or just plain and simple, get them involved?
Did you see Lagarde talk to anybody in the private sector? The guys who create wealth.
Isn't that a challenge?
That's the mistake.
Why did that happen?
Because they don't understand that money is made by private people. They were talking to, with respect to all the guys they spoke to, no problem. But then they asked Dangote, how do you make money? Dangote's model is so simple. He says, I stay in Nigeria and in Africa and make money. Adenuga is not visible. These are the guys who are on Forbes' list, the richest men in Africa. If you put their money together, it's more than government's money. Why can't you call them and say, how are you guys doing this thing? Then they will tell you the constraints. In spite of the constraints, Aliko is pressing ahead to make money.
You know, the analogy of the man who's got the yam and he couldn't have access to his yam van. Let's bring it to law now. You're a lawyer. You were talking about some constraints or restraints, legal restraints.
I'll give you one.
Let's look at the legal restraints.
I'll give you one. We are in channels. Let's say it's cost you 1 billion to build. Let's say Mr. Momo has worked very hard to raise the cash to do this. With this type of building, John Momo is potentially a trillionaire. But I can assure you that he doesn't have a C of O. Or if he does have, it would have taken him 6 years. The house I have in Onitsha is worth about 400 million. But because of the archaic titling laws, I can't tell you as my bank manager to give me a loan on it. Except I take you to Onitsha and say, here's the house. And then you put security people on the house. But if I had fungibility, meaning if I had a title that I can give to you, you will hold it and give me a loan. So the legal system relating to land administration is absolutely archaic. So the first thing you need to do is to create a new legal system that will make titling alive so that you can relate property to finance. That's what DeSoto, if you know about DeSoto.
Okay, let me just follow up on that. Some of the challenge that seems to have popped up with this one, even those cases where the banks have actually looked at the CFO, held onto it, and given them access to credit, some of them can't meet up, and then the banks eventually go for those houses and take them up.
No, it happens everywhere. You can't have you can't have an ideal world. Even in America, it happens. We are talking about delinquent borrowers. That will happen. But first of all, talk about the good guys. Create a situation where the good guys can access capital.
Well, these are people who tried to, but the circumstances just couldn't, it didn't work for them.
It's bound to happen. You can't have an ideal world. That's what I'm saying. You can't have an ideal world, but you will have what we need is to reverse legal failure. Do you know that Nigeria suffers from legal failure? And that's why all these anti-corruption cases keep going round and round. No one gets caught, no one gets jailed because the courts don't work. The systems are not working properly. The EFCC applying the wrong laws, chasing the wrong guys. So the entire place is in a morass.
You know, looking at this budget and looking inwards, as the president would say, we have to look at so many other potentials if we say we want to look inwards. So many people have been talking about how much we can get from within. And are there places you thought that we haven't actually looked at, that we haven't explored, that can give us that bounce economic-wise?
But I just told you. I gave you one. I've given you three. I've given you oil and gas, and you said, "Oh, are we not going to diversify?" We can drill down. We can drill deeper. So there's money in oil and gas. There's money in the maritime sector. There's money in the housing sector. These are things that we can get money from, but we cannot because we are that farmer whose access to the barnyard is blocked.
What kind of opportunities do we have within the maritime and housing sectors?
The first measure for any economic process is how many housing starts do you have? If you want to say this country is doing well, you look at how many construction starts do you have in a month. Now, the reason why that is important is that it ripples through the economy and creates all kinds of jobs. But if you do not have a viable construction economy, then there's nothing to happen. Then you go on to the real sector. Those in manufacturing, I don't have to tell you that that's dead. So all you have are people who are trading short. So the banks have realized that to trade short money is the best. So the banks burn their fingers by trading on stocks and on oil.
But many would have thought that they should have seen this a long time ago.
Who?
The banks trading on short-term loans,
No,
because it should be long-term loans.
The problem is the government. You can't trade long if the interest rates are 29, 30%. Now, is it not ridiculous that President Buhari has taken the transformational step of taking away money from the banks? The whole process was the government would borrow from the banks, but the money in the banks belonged to the government. So the government kept their money in the banks and borrowed at high rates. Now, President Buhari does the correct thing by taking it away. And he hasn't gone further to then say, you know what? As a matter of public policy, we will lend only at 6%.